Hi everybody, welcome to our session today. Good afternoon, good morning for some of you joining online, or good evening. So today we're going to be talking about uncovering the value of WASH research through partnership and showcasing the USAID programs that are going on. So I'm going to just run through a quick overview of the session. So a couple housekeeping items. The session will be recorded. For our online audience, please introduce yourself, your name, organization, country in the chat, and put your questions in the chat box and participate in our polls. And we have a great lineup of speakers and panelists today. Really excited about the team that we have here. And so our agenda for the day is we're going to first start with an introduction from Jeff Goldberg, and then we're going to go into an example of research partnerships, and then go through presentations on the different USAID mechanisms, have some breakout group discussions on specific topics, and then have our closing. So with that, I would like to welcome Jeff Goldberg to introduce the session. And Jeff is the director of the Center for Water at USAID. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much, Rachel, and really glad to be with you all here in the room and those online as well. As Rachel mentioned, I'm Jeff Goldberg. I'm the director of USAID's Center for Water Security, Sanitation, and Hygiene. I'm really thrilled to be here for this session, which will feature our work under our brand new Water for the World implementation research agenda. So as some of you may know and others may not, USAID released the Implementation Research Agenda, which complements our agency plan under our whole-of-government U.S. Global Water Strategy at the height of COVID-19. So we didn't formally get to have a launch event for it, but all the better, we're a year into it now. So instead of just launching it, we can talk about some of the work that's going on under it. And just a little bit of history. Developing the research agenda was a multi-year process for us, and it's really gratifying to be doing this here at World Water Week, because in fact, the last World Water Week that was in person in 2019, we held some donor consultations with other donor counterparts to make sure that any investments that we make in research are complementary to what's going on in the sector as a whole. And then later that fall, we held a public consultation at the UNC Water and Health Conference that many of you here in person, and I'm sure online, fed into. So this is really in that same vein of the consultations that we went through during the development of this agenda. This is intended not just to be a tool for USAID, but really to be a vehicle to promote sector-wide collaboration to enhance the effectiveness and maximize the impact of the investments of the sector overall. So just a few more words on the scope of the research agenda to that point, and put a little bit of a finer point on that. So as I mentioned, with taxpayer dollars, we really view our role centrally at headquarters at USAID to make sure that we remain at the tip of the spear and that we are investing in approaches and implementation modalities that we know will get the biggest value for money and maximize, as I said, the impact that we're all seeking. So to that end, through these consultations, we identified a series of priority gaps in knowledge of approaches, and that's a key point. It's about approaches here. We're not questioning the overall intrinsic value of water and sanitation. We took as a core premise that we're trying to really hone in on the implementation modalities. And so we're focusing on broad questions within the areas of increasing access to safe drinking water, increasing access to sanitation and the practice of key hygiene behaviors, and improving management of water resources. And so today's session is really intended to stimulate collaboration, and we've designed an interactive session to that effect. But really long term, we want to continue to engage with you. The spirit of bringing everybody together is to make sure, again, that this is not just evidence that we're producing that will sit in PDFs on USAID's website, but that we interact with the sector overall so we can all make best use of our scarce foreign assistance dollars in WASH. So for our part, we're planning to invest up to $65 million, subject to the availability of funds and annual appropriations, in answering a subset of questions through 3 dedicated implementation research activities that we're funding out of headquarters. And I'll just speak really quickly to the broad strokes of these 3, but you'll hear through this session from these projects directly. So we've worked to carefully design these 3 to work in tandem together and to execute field research activities and ensure, again, that learning translates into action. So the first is WASH PALS 2, which is a follow-on to the original Water Sanitation and Hygiene Partnerships for Learning and Sustainability activity that many of you know, which was implemented from 2016 to 2021. So in addition to hearing about the updated scope of that project, which now includes attention to the fecal sludge value chain, in addition to focus on area-wide sanitation implementation modalities, which we've certainly all been talking a lot about, the scope also includes extensive research on menstrual hygiene and health, and you'll hear about how the results of WASH PALS 1's extensive research partnerships, including with UNICEF across multiple countries, is influencing how we want to partner not only with WASH PALS 2, but with these other activities. You'll also be hearing about Urban WASH, which is a research project focused on both WASH and water resources management in cities and peri-urban areas, with a focus on enabling environment factors for accelerating urban water and sanitation service delivery, improving the performance and sustainability of small and informal providers, and measures for source water protection and diversification, which is all the more critical in the face of climate change. And then finally, you'll hear about Real Water. Some of you may have already heard literally about it through our podcast on that. But this is our research focused on rural services. And Real Water's 3 priority research areas are focused on increasing drinking water safety and monitoring, producing a clear understanding of how to professionalize rural water service delivery to elevate facility performance, and how to incorporate water resources management, again, into the planning and execution of rural water supply programs. So, again, we really feel that it's our role from a headquarters standpoint to make sure that we are investing resources to make sure that some of these higher calls to action that we've all been talking about the past couple of years, area-wide sanitation, professionalized rural water service delivery, that we put a finer point on how to do this in specific contexts. And we're really eager to partner with all of you as we close in on the 2030 date and the need to really accelerate the pace of change to achieve SDG 6. So just in closing, really, really grateful for your participation, looking forward to the interactive session to come, and really looking forward to deepening our collaboration on this research agenda, not just today, but throughout the implementation of these 3 projects. So big thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Rachel.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, it's really exciting to see USAID prioritizing evidence-driven programming, and we're just really happy to be here for this session and see this movement more generally in the sector. So thanks. Next up, I realized I actually forgot to introduce myself. I'm Rachel Pellitz, the Executive Director of the Quiet Institute. But next up, I'd like to introduce Caroline van der Wooden, who is with WASH PALS 2. So she's the Deputy Chief of Party for WASH PALS 2. And she's going to be talking us through an example of a research partnership, which was under WASH PALS 1. So thanks, Caroline.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. And yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about WASH PALS, the first WASH PALS, to explain a bit how the model works. I wasn't part of the first WASH PALS, but I'm just talking you through what it looked like. There are some people in the room who were active members, including Rachel. So if you have questions after, there are people that can help you further. But really, just points about the PDFs. The point of doing research differently is that what we want to do here is do the kind of research that directly informs the way programs are implemented. USAID programs, but also very much, programs of partners and with partners, to not end up with, that many reports that aren't ever downloaded or read. And also really, just to make the point that this kind of research, what we're interested here is not really, again, proving that WASH is worthwhile. This research really did come from some of these trials that were done, and that showed us that, some research can actually lead to some controversy, but really what we should be focusing on is the kind of research that helps us to figure out what works. And so that's very much what all these programs are about, and what WASH-PALS 1 was also about. So the way it's designed, the way WASH-PALS was designed, and you'll see some of this back in the next presentations from the current structures, is very much focused on implementation research, so working with implementing programs in the field to layer on a research design that helps learn from the program as it's going on, but that is solid and academic and well structured. So tailoring research with the institutional partners, but also very much with the local actors, and co-learning, which is a bit of a phrase, but the point that this is not the kind of research that gets done by people that come in, do the research and take it back home, but this is the research that you do by learning. You really learn jointly. So it has to include frequent consultation. It has to include, pre and post workshops. Most of these researchers actually have an MOU in place with the local partners that really outlines what the roles and responsibilities of the different partners in this research and in that program are, and do a lot of one-on-one sharing, broad dissemination, but don't look at it as something that leads to a paper and uptake. It may have the paper too. It's still research. It's nice, but really it's about how it informs programming, which means there has to be another level of engagement, and so that's why the activity-wide engagement strategy is really important. And so each of the research programs, but then also each of the research projects underneath that get done in the different countries have their own engagement strategy. So it really does focus on understanding that level of engagement that you need to get to uptake of the research and use of the findings of the research. So a few words on some of the experiences from the first WASH-PALS. That there was WASH-PALS was a very good program, and I can say that because I wasn't directly on it. I think it did some really interesting research that definitely led to messages and findings that were taken up and informed programs and policy directly, mainly at the local level in those countries where the programs were going on, but even also beyond that. There was some uptake among the global partners as well. But it's worth acknowledging that there was probably limited replication or spread by those that weren't directly engaged. So, the circle of partners WASH-PALS had were very involved, engaged, and interested in taking up the learning, but beyond that, we may not have quite reached the audiences and the people that we were hoping to reach. There are many reasons. I can say COVID as well. It's not there are reasons, but it's worth acknowledging, and it's worth that it's something we try to do better in this second round. Another thing to acknowledge is that learning is not a linear process, and what we want to move away from is this narrative of uptake and dissemination, and we will send you a paper tomorrow. What we want to get to is let's learn together on how you can use this data, and that's very much how these programs are supposed to be structured. And the last one, it takes time. It takes time to operationalize. It takes time for organizations to take learning that's come from one program experience and actually turn that into guidance or policy or strategy for that organization going forward. So there's also a lag time, and that has to also be acknowledged. So what we wanted to do now, before we go into presenting the 3 different mechanisms in a bit more detail, is talk, or not me, is to ask someone who's been involved as an implementing partner in the research with WASH-PALS. And so what we wanted to focus on particularly is the relationship with UNICEF. WASH-PALS worked with UNICEF on a couple of things. One of them was a field trial on targeted subsidies for sanitation in northern Ghana, but there was some other work done as well. And so what we wanted to do is ask Anne, if I'm allowed to just introduce Anne, ask Anne Thomas, the senior WASH advisor from UNICEF, to say a few words on how this kind of relationship works from the implementing partner's point of view, in this case, UNICEF. So Anne, over to you, thanks.
Thanks very much. And I also, I wasn't part of WASH-PALS 1, but this is the insights I got from one of our country offices and one of my team members who served on the board of WASH Pals. So I think, first of all, I think there was just a strong collaboration that spanned globally, across some of the topics of interest in the research of WASH Pals, but also, that went deep in some of the countries. And the specific insight was from Ghana, where our country team was grappling with this issue of subsidies, and it was becoming quite polarized within CLTS, and they really wanted to know how best to time the subsidies and how best to target communities for the subsidies. But it went much further than that, actually looking at sort of a comparison of different household financing schemes across the country, which even today is actually having relevance for this plan to scale up a new program. So I think the experience was very positive, and I think being able to have that kind of timely, real-time research that's responsive to a country's current need was good. And from what I understand, it happened very sort of quickly and dynamically and responsively. So I think that was good. And I think really going forward, it's how we interplay the country needs and research with rollout of similar approaches in other countries. And I think there was a suggestion here from the global team that maybe we can do more in terms of spreading the learnings across to other countries, because some of the insights were really good, and it would be good to share that more broadly. And I think in the context of the new program and UNICEF's new game plan, I think there's a lot of opportunities for further research that we could explore. So I think that's it from us.
Thank you, Anne, and thanks, Caroline. Oh, round of applause. Sounded like people wanted to give one there. So great. Thanks so much. It's really great to hear an example of how research was integrated into an implementing program with UNICEF in Ghana on subsidies for sanitation. So thanks. So next up, now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the three mechanisms that Jeff introduced to us briefly, but we're going to hear a little bit more about each of those, starting with real water. So I'm going, here we go. Here's the three mechanisms. So real water, and then urban wash and wash pals too. So I'm going to start with passing the mic to Vanessa Gunther from the Quiet Institute on real water. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. As Rachel mentioned, my name is Vanessa, and I'm here to introduce Real Water to you. It stands for Rural Evidence and Learning for Water. We're actually very proud of the acronym. It's very catchy, and we try to keep it real, as our podcast says. So real quick, our definition for rural is a bit flexible, but we tend to think of it as anything outside of urban centers, often agrarian villages or low-density communities. So Real Water is funded through an $18.9 million cooperative agreement and will run over 5 years till 2026. And as an implementation research program, our goal is to develop and evaluate strategies for expanding access to safe, equitable, sustainable, and rural water services, especially in low to middle income countries. And this map shows some of the countries we are currently focusing our research in. So there's Ghana, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, and India. So these are confirmed research locations, and we're also, depending on how our research questions develop, we're also looking at other countries and evaluating other sites. So how are we gonna get to our goal? So we have a great consortium I want to introduce. So I'm with the Quiet Institute, which is an applied research organization, and we're also the lead grantee for Real Water, and they're responsible for the program's activities on water testing and water safety. Our consortium includes AquaConsult, which has a long history of analyzing rural water management models. Hi, Harold. The Ashoka Trust for Research and Ecology in the Environment, based in Bangalore in India, which is our lead on water resource teleconnections with rural water supply. We also have Veena here today. the Rural Water Supply Network, hi Sean, which provides knowledge sharing and connections among thousands of members. And we're also pleased to work with the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana as a key research partner, as well as 2 implementers of rural water programs in Africa, Safe Water Network and Water Mission. So all of us are working together to focus on 3 important interrelated aspects of rural water supply development. And the first one is to improve management performance of rural water services. So rural water supply occurs via a number of management modalities, from public utility provisions to delegated private sector responsibility to community-based management. So Real Water is seeking to better understand what factors are instrumental in the system performance. The second one is improving planning for water resources. So Real Water is exploring the requirements for successfully implementing holistic water resource management, specifically in the context of climate-induced scarcity and extreme weather events. And lastly, we have water quality testing and in turn water safety. So Real Water wants to gain insight into the implementation models and associated factors that will improve routine water quality monitoring and water safety management. And I want to spend a little time talking about an example of this last topic that Real Water is evaluating, called the Water Quality Assurance Fund. So briefly, the fund is a safeguard to encourage water quality laboratories to provide water quality testing services to water systems in rural areas that lack capacity. So I will show the short video. Well, it's 4 minutes. I tried to do it in voiceover for this, but it didn't make the cut, so you'll have to read along a little bit.
The issue is not just serving water, but water that is safe and good for consumption.
Under the testing program, the systems do pay some money to Ghana Water Company. And of course, we are getting the extra revenue from that. So it's of great interest to us.
Professionalizing water quality testing has been the entry point for a series of changes in the district. To start with, water is now being treated.
Stakeholders and customers are now demanding for water testing better services. Another area is also the improvement in the relationship between the customers and then the water operators. Because customers are now happy with the services that is being rendered.
So under Real Water, we're actually doing a rigorous evaluation of this intervention. We're specifically in Kenya and Ghana through a randomized control trial, and we're also piloting this invention in Ghana and in Uganda and Tanzania. And then lastly, I'm sure now you're all interested in Real Water and want to stay in touch. So I want to highlight our plethora of communications channels. We have our website on Global Waters, which has our newest PDFs and outputs, but also a lot of other more interactive options like the podcast, which Jeff mentioned. There's new episodes around every 6 weeks, and it's a new medium for us, so it's very exciting. So any feedback is appreciative, and I got to meet some fans out in these hallways already, so that's encouraging to see. If you prefer reading rather than listening, every podcast is accompanied with a blog post that also includes the main points. And then you can join our newsletter on Global Waters, or our WSN's newsletter also has a section on Real Water. And then, as always, you can follow any of the consortium members on social media. So that's the little plug to stay in touch. And yeah, thank you for listening. I will pass it on to Urban Wash. Or did you want to do an intro?
Yeah, that's fine. Great, thanks everybody. We're gonna try to do a quick computer switch here. So as we're doing that, I'm gonna actually just maybe ask for one question for Vanessa during this. Oh, I have both mics, I realized, during the switch over. Or it can also be through the other presentations earlier.
I really enjoyed the presentation. That's awesome work. My name is John. I'm an engineer from MIT, so I don't really have a lot of the business or like social sciences background, but it's really cool to see through this conference. I was wondering basically what sort of incentivizes users to pay for water in this structure. Can you elaborate a little bit more on like how that works? Sorry, I'll pass this back.
Thanks. You want me to take that? Yes. Okay. Sure. Yeah, I'll take that one on behalf of Real Water. So in this structure, it's actually not users that are paying specifically. I mean, they're paying through tariffs, but then it's a agreement between the district government, who's responsible for managing the water systems, and the lab that's doing the testing, and then the assurance fund that Aquia is leading. So yeah, thanks. Great. So I think now here we are set up. So I will introduce our next speaker, Ruhi Abdullah. So thank you so much. And she's with Urban WASH. She's the chief of party for Urban WASH. So thanks.
Thanks a lot, Rachel. So thank you, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all those present in the room, and as well as those joining us virtually. As Rachel mentioned, my name is Ruhi Abdullah, and I'm the chief of party for the Urban WASH project. So let's get started. The urban resilience by building and applying new evidence in WASH, short form Urban WASH, is a US-funded global 5-year research and learning project. Its goal is to promote impactful, sustainable, equitable, and climate-resilient WASH and WRM programming. It will target urban and peri-urban areas. It will strengthen evidence-based decision-making of partners and host governments at the local, regional, state, and national levels. The project is implemented by Tetra Tech in collaboration with consortium partners including Acquire Institute, which is Rachel and the other people here. FSG, represented by Rishi here at the back. Iris Group, Segura Consulting, SCI, and WaterAid. So the project is basically, it comprises of, to achieve this objective, the Urban WASH project will perform tasks and accomplish deliverables under the following 3 interrelated components. But our plan as a circuit, in a circuitous continuum. And that's very integral to this because one kind of leads to the other. So it's, there's a learning ongoing throughout the project life. So component 1 focuses on strategic engagements and partnerships. Component 2 focuses on implementation research to generate high quality evidence. And component 3 focuses on short-term on-demand USAID technical assistance. So just taking a little bit of a deeper dive in under component 1, I want you to think about this across 3 tiers. The first one being the anchor, which is based on engagement for the project. The second tier is the thought leadership, which is based on the advisory board, partners and collaboration, research working group, and technical advisors and WASH experts. And the last tier is dissemination and uptake, which is to facilitate uptake and develop research and learning project. And now thinking back what Caroline initially said, this kind of is building up and you can connect the dots backward. So this is, I mean, this seems a little overwhelming, but we're not going to sort of delve more in detail, but I just want you to, lay this out there that we cannot achieve our outcomes, long-term and short-term, without effective engagement and strategic partnership, which is at the core here, research producers, knowledge brokers, and users. We have been purposeful and engaging local and global partners early. This is particularly critical to design and implement demand-driven research. We recognize that engagement is complex and will remain dynamic, continuously adapting to the changing context. Once again, engagement is a nonlinear and interconnected process where some activities can happen simultaneously and provide feedback for iterating approaches and anticipated outputs and outcomes. Urban WASH will monitor and adapt its methods of engagement over the project lifecycle. This will ensure continual improvement of our engagement and communication strategies so that efforts remain relevant to any changes in the context to outcome and are responsive, adaptable, and actionable. So component 2 is basically the implementation research piece. It comprises of 3 focus areas. The first one focuses on the enabling environment for improved access to quality water and citywide sanitation. Focus area 2 focuses on approaches for sustainable, small and informal service provision. And focus area 3 focuses on measures to improve source water protection and diversification. And this is where the nexus of WRM and water supply lies. So just a little bit of a deeper dive in terms of the focus area, because the focus area sort of lays out the questions and takes a deeper dive. But I won't go in too much detail here because there's a lot of text on the slide. But focus area 1, which is focused on enabling environment, the focus here is mostly on policies, regulation, and institutional arrangements, water safety, and pro-poor subsidies. The focus area 2, which focuses on small-scale informal providers, the focus is on policy, legal, and regulatory and capacity building frameworks, scalable, inclusive market models to allow for viable participation of SIPs in citywide inclusive wash systems, and cost of compliance for formalization. Focus area 3, which focuses on water resource management and at the nexus of water supply system, is basically effective collaboration and coordination across agencies for resilient water supply, water source protection, effective use and uptake of decision support, and mobilizing financial resources and investment. And like I mentioned, there are tweaks happening as we are going along. So quickly, so at this point in time, on the different focus areas, we need partners for implementation research activities on different topics noted. Focus area 1, we've currently drafted a memorandum of understanding in place with GWCL and Nairobi for implementation research activities on the topics noted. We're exploring potential partners under focus area 2. We're exploring potential partnerships in Asia and Africa for implementation research on scaling equitable FSM models and viable tariffs for water small local providers. Under focus area 3, we are exploring partnership potentially with city water authorities in low resource setting to effectively assess vulnerabilities, develop and implement solutions, including source water protection and diversification, sustainable governance and funding models for resilient water supply in low resource settings. So under component 3, basically, this is based on buy-ins that come in as needed from the US missions. And the core buckets here are implementation research, assessment and analytics, and M&E. So this is a map that actually kind of lays out where Urban WASH is operating right now. We are basically doing implementation research and desk research in around 20 countries, which includes case study research in 16 countries and implementation research in 9 countries ongoing and planned. What we are seeking is global, national, and local engagement partners for implementation research as well as dissemination and uptake on our findings. So this is our ask, basically, and hopefully this platform provides us that opportunity. So thank you. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions or are if you're working in any of the countries that we are currently working and exploring for any partnership possibilities. Thank you, everybody.
Great, thanks, Ruhi. It's really exciting to see this work on enabling environments and asking some of the key questions around regulations and policies, small and informal providers, and also source water protection. So as we're doing this quick changeover, I will ask maybe for one question from the audience for Ruhi. Thanks. Hi, Barbara.
Hi. Hi. Ruhi, quick question, sorry. So, I really love this whole concept of the co-learning, and obviously that's a tremendous benefit for the research partners. But these issues, we're all wrestling with them every single day. Is there a way to kind of have a co-learning process for the sector? So as these findings are as the evidence is building, the rest of us can also make sure that we're being able to tap in and take advantage of it as well before a report comes out.
So this is a very iterative cycle, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we've over the decades we've looked at different modalities, what has worked, what hasn't worked. This is sort of a modality that we are sort of also experimenting with as we go along, right? So the research working groups that we're having, we will be publishing blogs on it. We'll be publishing some short notes that could be sort of act as a sort of espouse some discussion and sort of open the door for discussion. So that is something on the radar. And that's something that we will be engaging in. But the thing is that co-design, right now we are starting implementation research, so we are testing how the co-design will roll out with country working groups, and then how do we engage to actually get the co-design mechanism working. So that's in the works, but you will be hearing on that soon, hopefully before the end of the year.
Great. Thanks so much, Ruhi and Barbara. So next up, we have Caroline, who you've already heard from, but now she'll be talking about WASH Pals 2.
Hello again. So thanks very much. And yes, WASH Pals 2 is structured very similarly to the structures, to the two projects that I've already presented. It's a roughly $25 million program, of which about 10 million is for technical assistance, the same type of technical assistance that Rui described, to missions, to implementing partners, and also a small grant window, which will allow us to do to provide grants to organizations to do smaller research projects that complement the big research that's going on with the partners involved here. So the goal of WASH Pals 2 is very much to support learning and improvements around challenges to ensuring quality, equity, sustainability, and scale of sanitation products and services, as well as adoption of sound hygiene practices. And there is a focus particularly on rural areas. WASH Pals 2 is led by Tetra Tech with some of the same partners you've already heard from before. FSG, Rishi's in the back, Iris Group working on Jesse issues, FHI 360. No, not sure one's in the room. And ID Insight, taking on some of the different themes. The focus regions are particularly Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, and focusing on the USAID Water focused countries mainly. As per the previous presentation by Rui as well, building that partnership and making sure there is a lot of strategic thought leadership from across different partners is really important. So we've got various structures to help us with that. The implementing partners, obviously, and like Rui was saying just now, all the research projects will be very much co-designed with those implementing partners. Then there's also an advisory board which has representation from those organizations on the side there, as well as an internal research working group and different technical advisors and experts. And that is really a mix of people with an academic background to make sure that the research we're doing does have the quality it needs to have, but also people with a practitioner and programming background to make sure that it's the kind of research that is relevant for them. We are building on the first WASH Pals, and I would say one of the key takeaways from WASH Pals, the 5 years of research that were done there, is really that sanitation interventions cannot function independently. That there is a space for work on behavior change and on demand creation, that there is a very important need to build markets, but also that there are very many vulnerable people that have trouble accessing that market, and that under a traditional CLTS approach, if you like, would end up with facilities that just aren't durable, that aren't of sufficient quality, and so that there is space to bring a subsidy element back in for those very vulnerable and poor customers that couldn't afford access to sanitation otherwise. But how those three work together is very much a question that WASH Pals 2 is picking up on. And like Jeff mentioned, the overarching umbrella theme for WASH Pals 2 is area-wide sanitation. So how to do sanitation planning and programming for an entire district, commune, county, whatever it may be, for an entire administrative area. Planning for that entire area, obviously programming would be phased. It's unrealistic to think that you could reach an entire area, but at least to plan for covering that entire area, takes into account the fact that different approaches and different interventions will probably be needed for different parts of that area and for different population groups within that area. So area-wide sanitation, in a nutshell, seeks universal, sustainable, area-wide sanitation and hygiene service delivery at scale, with a focus on safely managed sanitation and hygiene. And that is important because that is probably also a bit of a progression. WASH-PALS spends a fair amount of time trying to understand CLTS and the focus on ODF. WASH-PALS 2 is very much looking at the safely managed sanitation chain as a whole. And so the key principles for that really are scale, universal coverage, and local/national government leadership. Under that umbrella, we have 3 research themes, or 3 research focus areas. The first one is area-wide sanitation itself. There's a lot to learn still. It is a relatively new concept in that even though there's been a fair amount of experience in doing area-wide CLTS or ODF programming, there isn't that much experience yet on how to be set up to deliver on area-wide safely managed, or at least even area-wide basic sanitation. So there is learning to be done on the theme itself, on the implementation of area-wide sanitation, but even on the core components and the operational framework of how to make area-wide sanitation work and what's involved there. And so themes we expect to be delving deeper into through the implementation research include the role of monitoring and evaluation and learning and adaptive management. We see that as a really key component, a key building block, if you like, of doing area-wide sanitation well, but there is a lot to learn on, for example, what does government-led, local government-led M&E and adaptive management look like in a way that is scalable and sustainable and feasible. Another theme here is on fecal-management and/or safely managed sanitation services in a rural context, acknowledging that FSM isn't always applicable depending on how rural you are and what kind of sanitation systems are in place, but focusing on what is required to make sure households construct and maintain toilets that are safely managed along the lifespan. And then the last theme here is really on gender equity and social inclusion. And under that, we will pick up on the work done on subsidy research that was already done under WASH-PALS 1, but then really focusing on what I was saying earlier, that integration of these 3 elements, subsidies, behavior, CLTS if you like, and markets, and how those 3 can work together most effectively and when with most value for money, given that what we're after here is scale and government leadership. But also looking at other gender equality and in social inclusion approaches that aren't about money per se, but that are about, injecting a Jessie lens on all the work that gets done. The second focus area, the second theme is market-based sanitation. That was already a core theme of interest under WASH-PALS and is very much building on that, but again with that lens of area-wide sanitation. And so one of the areas of investigation there will be about optimizing enterprise engagement and expanding markets, within that district, within that area, to see how markets can target or can service a larger share of the population within an area by either working on the product systems and making the product systems more appropriate, more affordable, more transportable out there to people that may live a bit further away from the towns or from the current market catchment areas, as well as looking at channel financing, for example, helping enterprises to then be able to extend credits or extend better, longer credits to their customers. Another piece of work here is on decision support tools, and this very much builds on WASH-PALS, and this is about providing or doing modeling on possible policies and policies and strategies that sort of take place in the business in the larger business environment, but that can have a real positive impact on the strength of the markets. And lastly, there is a focus on understanding what viable rural FSM business models might look like. And I'm saying viable here on the understanding that might not mean a business that can run itself without any kind of government or other support, but that is part of what we're investigating. And then lastly, social behavior change and hygienic environments. That's led by FHI 360, and there we expect to look on the one hand, at a strong focus on infants and young children and interventions that need to be put in place to break that chain of infection for infants and young children. And so focusing strongly on the caregiver behaviors, but also on animal feces management and other interventions to clean up the environment, to have a more hygienic environment for the infants and young children, as well as interventions that look at the nexus, I would almost say, because that's such a popular word this week, the link between hand hygiene and food hygiene, specific again to infants and young children. So that's roughly what the research will be looking at. But one other piece of work that is ongoing under WASH PALS 2 is we are undertaking a sanitation and hygiene workforce capacity needs assessment that will inform a roadmap. I won't go into much detail. I'm very happy to talk to you any of you about this afterwards. It's underway. We have done a sort of a global, if you like, overview. The purpose is to understand the human resources capacity, the human resources required to deliver universal access to safely managed sanitation and hygiene services. Again, with a focus on rural, because there is much less knowledge on what human resources requirement for rural sanitation, what they are, what they look like, what kind of functions are needed, what kind of skills are needed, and who would be employing the people with those skills, what are the different institutions. So it does have a focus again on sort of the human resources requirements to deliver on-site sanitation systems sustainably, with that roadmap in mind. For this project, there are case studies ongoing in 6 countries, Rwanda, Ghana, and Nigeria, and Nepal, India, and the Philippines. And then lastly, I just wanted to make a point that, yes, we are still seeking partners. We don't have the implementation countries all outlined yet. So we're still very much in those discussions. But we also seek partners to continue our learning on area-wide sanitation, even beyond those direct implementation research pieces we will be doing, to share reflections, learning, and data in a facilitated process, to inform the core components and the operational framework of what successful area-wide sanitation actually is. We hope to publish a preliminary desk review report shortly, which lays out our current understanding and our current thinking on what the operational framework for area-wide sanitation might be, but really with the idea that the next 5 years of research will inform that, and we may very well come up with an updated version of that understanding in a few years' time. And we are very keen to collaborate, for more systematic documentation, because even now in this first phase of trying to do desk review on area-wide sanitation, it is new. Rural sanitation is a bit neglected. It's been mentioned quite a few times this week. And there is also much less documented evidence on it that's available. So documentation is important, and we're very keen to work on that with partners as well. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you. Back to Rachel.
Great. Thank you so much, Caroline. It's great to hear about area-wide sanitation, market-based approaches, and social behavior change, and how that research is really going to move this sector. So I think we'll just take one question. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This is fantastic, and really exciting to see the sort of work that's already begun. And I love the Assurance Fund, by the way. So I just had, my name is Deepa Karthikeyan. I'm from Athena Infonomics. I love this sort of focus that all of you brought out on the need for shift in language from uptake and dissemination to use. I wonder if there's an effort among the 3 programs to come together and think of a harmonized set of indicators of what success looks like on use and language that will get used consistently. And sort of a follow-on to that is, so we're leading a learning platform on citywide inclusive sanitation supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this is something we struggle with. I feel like when you kind of unpack words like co-learning, co-production of evidence, there's so much that needs to be said about the process of how that's done well. And I wonder if that'll get covered in, for example, the next podcast, or if there's an emphasis on also talking about the how of the co-learning and where you failed and where you've succeeded. Thanks.
Well, yeah, just to say that, yes, we have been discussing it. We've already even had a Global Waters facilitated discussion about it a while back, which includes sharing info between us on the best type of indicators and ways of monitoring this, but also some of the pitfalls and things to be looking out for. So yeah, it's on our minds, and we hope to be able to share some of that learning on the learning, as well.
It's a great question. Maybe just a quick response from overall USAID perspective. We view this as critical implementation research across these three activities, but we do have a broader framework for collaborating, learning, and adapting over time from an agency-wide perspective. So you may be familiar with many of the technical briefs that we've put out that synthesize the most recent evidence. And one conversation that we're having as a team is, based on all of the results of this, how can we present all of this as a common package externally too? So we are still working on that internally, but certainly that evolution of having had this series of tech briefs with these investments now, we're thinking about that both internally to influence our own field staff, but then similarly externally, sector-wide, to make sure that this is all presented in a coherent, digestible format across all of these.
Thanks so much. So in the interest of time, we're going to move to the next phase, which is breakout groups. And because we want to hear from all of you. I know this was somewhat high level, and it'll be great to dig into some of the details. So we're going to not have group number 5, and we're going to have 4 groups here in the room in the 4 corners, and then we're going to have 1 online. So for those of you that are online, please look at the polls, and in the chat there'll be questions for you to participate in. So in this corner over here, we're going to have on area-wide sanitation, and Caroline is going to be facilitating that one. In this corner here, we're going to have Ruhi on urban wash services for the poor. And then in this corner back here, we're going to have Veena from Atri, who's going to be leading on linking wash, water resources, and climate resilience. And then in the far corner there, we're going to have Rishi, hi Rishi, from FSG, leading on incentivizing service providers or private sector engagement. So we have almost half an hour, 25 minutes or so, and we're also going to have Harold Lockwood from Agua Consult is going to be rotating around. You are welcome to rotate around yourselves if you want as well, or you can stick with one group the whole time. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Please don't leave, too. Thanks. Carol Lockwood from Agua Consult just to give a couple thoughts before we do our closing. So,
thanks very much, Rachel. I went very briefly around the group, so it's pretty time limited exercise. But I think there was probably some predictable discussions around using evidence, packaging it in a appropriate way to reach your audiences. But two things that I think jumped out at me and struck me were around, one, the word and the concept of local, so locally led evidence, about talking to and engaging with your intended audiences from the very beginning. So don't, do all this evidence gathering, generate evidence and produce lots of papers and then go and find your audience and look a hammer to look, what is it saying? Build a nail and then look for a hammer to hit it with. And then the second issue or theme that came out very briefly in these discussions was around scale. So at least two of the groups talked about the scale of partnerships. So if we generate this evidence, how do we really get it to impact? And the only way you can do that really is working. So there was a mention about health workers delivering messages from the table there Vina was running, and around engaging with local government, associations of local government in Bangladesh here in this group. So two things, sort of local and then scale, and how those two things, those themes apply to really delivering the evidence. We know we can produce the evidence, I think. It's how do you then use it effectively, and these two things jumped out. But it was a very, very quick exercise, so that's about it for now.
Thanks so much, Harold. And we're going to leave up the flip chart too. We're not going to go through all the groups, but feel free to wander around afterwards and look at some of the key points. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff Goldberg again to just give a quick closing for us. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, operative word being quick there. I know it's late in the day. But just to kind of reiterate what I mentioned at the top, we're really, really excited to be about a year into these 3 activities and investments beginning to work. But we don't want to be doing this in isolation. And the spirit of being here today is really to let you know what we're all up to. As you heard, we have some nascent partnerships formed with institutions across the sector. But to the extent you think there are opportunities or you would like to get involved, really encourage you to reach out to everybody that you heard from here today. And we really don't want this just to be something that's disseminated at the end, really moving beyond and committed to moving beyond simply posting reports and things of that nature. And we want to learn together. And we really think that this is imperative. We've talked a lot about the need to transform how we work. We know that there's certain kind of aspirations and buzzwords that we all use, but really kind of unpacking what that means on a contextual basis across different geographies, I think is really critical to make sure that our investments and the implementation modalities that everybody's working with yield the results that we all want. So big thanks for being here. Hope everybody's off to a drink or dinner or just relaxing. And yeah, thanks so much.